Good afternoon, and welcome to today's installment of the 2022 January series. I'm Michael Rubing, a senior from Jersey City, New Jersey, studying writing and global development, and recently returned from a Calvin semester abroad in Hungary. Would you please take a moment to silence your cell phones? As you are doing so, I would like to welcome guests from all of our 50 simulcast viewing locations, including South Windsor, Connecticut, Asheville, North Carolina, and Granville, Michigan, and all of our virtual attendees across time zones. We are grateful you're joining us today. And now, would you please join me in a word of prayer? Thank you, God, for the chance to travel, to look up from our situated lives and see the fullness of your world. Thank you that we can understand you better every time we hear someone else's story. Teach us to recognize the depth and beauty of every corner of this world, and convict us when we get too comfortable with our own culture and our own way of thinking. Bless our speaker today, and allow the wideness of your kingdom to become even more apparent through his words. Amen. And now, Cynthia Slaughter, Professor of Spanish and Director of Off-Campus Programs, will introduce our guest.
It is likely that for many of you, today's speaker needs no introduction. You know him from his television shows or his radio programs. Perhaps you've bought his guidebooks or consulted his website before you traveled. You may even have participated in one of his tours. Widely considered America's leading authority on European travel, Rick Steves encourages travelers to go beyond tourist sites to get to know the people and the culture of the places they're visiting. We hope that Calvin students will adopt Rick's philosophy of travel. According to Rick, budget travel is not a compromise, it's actually the best way to travel, because a tight budget forces you to travel close to the ground, meeting and communicating with people. Travel changes people. And Rick Steves has spent 40 years helping people experience the kind of travel that will transform their lives. Calvin University is grateful to Covenant Living of the Great Lakes for underwriting today's presentation. Please join me in welcoming Rick Steves.
Thank you so much, and it's a delight to be with you, even if it's just virtually. I would have loved to have been there in person, but life is complicated these days, especially for travel. And I'm really happy to be able to share some thoughts on why travel makes us better citizens, and that's kind of the foundation of my whole passion for teaching, is that we get out and get to know the world and become more friendly with it. So I'm looking forward to not only this one-way presentation, but also some Q&A after I'm done talking. But let me just take you through Europe. That's my beat. I love traveling all over the world. My favorite country is India. But as a teacher, I see Europe as a springboard for world exploration. My mission, as I like to joke, is to inspire Americans to venture beyond Orlando. And I think Europe would be the good first stop for that, and then we go beyond. Normally, I spend 100 days a year traveling in Europe. I need to do that to, keep my business vital. A third of that time, I'm with all alone, working with local guides to update my guidebooks. A third of that time, I'm working on our tour program. We take about 30,000 people around Europe on 1,000 different tours on a normal year. And a third of that time, I'm making our TV shows, which is a chance for me to bring home my passion for Europe and share it with people, even if they don't have a passport. They can travel through public television. One thing I love to do is be on the road and share these ideas with people through talks like this. I didn't travel for the first couple seasons of COVID, but I managed to slip over there a couple of times this fall. Had a great experience. I was actually on vacation, hiking around Mount Blanc. It's a wonderful opportunity. It's a venerable long-distance trail in Europe. It's 100 miles. People do it in 10 days. We sort of cherry-picked the best 60 miles in 6 days. And It was a glorious experience, and I could talk all day about that, but I just want to mention that there's a lot of people enjoying a lot of different dimensions of European travel. And one thing I'm always impressed by is, much as I've traveled in Europe, there's always new avenues, like this avenue here, high in the mountains, going around Europe's highest peak. Also, I met with our guides, and this is a bunch of our younger guides, and I'm teaching them how to do a tour Rick Steves way. Here we're building a Gothic cathedral out of 13 travelers. You need 6 columns, 6 buttresses, and 1 spire. But I'm busy working on an art series right now, and it was great to be in the museums with my TV crew. And also, it was really important for me to find out what's going on in Europe with COVID. I mean, if you have to wear a plastic mitt in order to replenish your breakfast plate, how do you get home, and where are you going to get that negative test? And that's all just a learning process. And right now we're sort of in a weird limbo, and I'm hoping and praying that we'll be traveling again in some sort of normalcy. But one thing I learned in this last couple of months of traveling is the magic of travel is there. And with this pandemic we're all living through, the importance of travel, I think, is greater than ever. And I want to talk now a little bit about why travel makes us better citizens. You know, I have it. To me, when we travel, we come together. And I'll start right off with just kind of a harsh image here. But people are divided. We've got people divided in our own country, and we got our country divided from the rest of the world, and we got terrible divisions within countries around the world. We've got divisions between privileged and unprivileged, of rich and poor, powerful and voiceless, and there's these walls. And every time I see a wall in my travels, and this happens to be the wall that separates Israel and Palestine, it's important to remember that there's 2 sides to the wall. And when we go there, we need to get on both sides. I was in Israel working on a TV show a few years ago and happened to be there on April 14th, which is their Independence Day, they're the 4th of July. And Israel's such an exciting story of how, we found a society, after the horrors of the Holocaust, that we have an opportunity for there to be a country for Jews, and big parties, barbecues everywhere. But on the other side of that wall, we've got a memorial to the big defeat. It's called the Day of Catastrophe. And we need to hear both narratives. And that's a kind of travel. It's 2 narrative travel. It occurred to me when I was reaching out to understand what is the reality on both sides of a wall like that, that the children are really burdened with their parents' baggage. I saw little Palestinian kids with plastic guns running around shooting imaginary Jews. And then I saw little Jewish kids with little plastic guns running around shooting imaginary Palestinian terrorists. And I thought, this is terrible. But then I thought, what was I doing when I was that age? I was a little kid equipped with guns by my parents. Every Christmas I'd get guns when I was that age. And who would I shoot? I would shoot the bad guys in my parents' mind. I would be shooting, I don't know what, communists, Germans, Indians, who knows what. But I am saddled with my parents' baggage, just like these kids are. And it occurred to me, there's an unintended consequence of walls. And that is, it keeps the younger generation from talking to each other, and it lets it be easier for our parents' baggage to be our baggage. And when we travel, we become aware of that. We can be mindful of that, and we can fight against it. We can get together, we can connect, we can become better citizens. When we think of the complications of the Holy Land, it kind of goes back 4,000 years. This is the tomb of the prophet Abraham. And of course, he's very important for Muslims, and he's very important for Jews. And this is his tomb. And it happens to be in an old building that now has a wall in the middle of it. Half of it is a mosque and half of it is a synagogue. And the tomb itself is divided by bulletproof glass. So Jews on one side and Muslims on the other can worship at their common prophet 4,000 years ago, Abraham. Boy, that's a long-seated division. And as travelers, when we travel, we get to talk to people. We can talk to Jews and learn from the Israeli perspective. We can talk to Muslims and learn from the Muslim perspective. And I get to have local guides. Here's my friend Kamal and my friend Abi, Palestinian and Israeli tour guides. They actually have a tough time getting together because of the wall in their society. They can't even, we had to work to find a place where we could park our cars together so I could go from one guide to the other. And I'll never forget when they shared their business cards and they got together, and they are victims of this wall. They're two beautiful souls. They're two loving people. They're two travel teachers. One is in a Palestinian community, one is an Israeli community, and they've got that wall they're living with. In my travels, I see walls of economic realities. I see some people living in land that's not designed for human inhabitation, ravines, dangerous places. And then I see a skyline of skyscrapers and business parks where the people in the ravines are trying to earn a living from. I go to cemeteries all over the world. Some people have big tombs. Other people have little what's called loculi. And other people, their bones are just tossed in an anonymous bone ditch, a boneyard. And even in death, we have this division between us. This division is a hard thing. We're divided in our society like never before, tragically, I think. And the United States is divided from the rest of the world in a lot of sad ways. It breaks my heart to see how fortified American embassies have to be around the planet. Throughout Central America, I've visited the American embassies and taken photos that would get me in trouble if they knew I was taking a photo. You're not to take a photo of the American embassy. Embassies are often built on the holy ground of the people that lived there, the indigenous people. American embassies are often the most fortified building in that country. They're referred to as just the embassy. Well, the point is, we are stakeholders in the world's complicated problems. As the most powerful and as the richest country on the planet, we're stakeholders. We are citizens of this reality. And I think, especially as Christians and people of faith, we have a moral obligation to own how our country is impacting the world, both good and bad. And that we learn about in our travels. That's one dimension of good citizenship. It's honest citizenship. And I love the way travel gets me out of my comfort zone. How travel teaches me, where do American school buses go when they're ready to be ditched, when they're ready to be retired? They go south of the border and they become public buses. It's such a cool or fun or thought-provoking example of the division between the North and the South. But one thing when you travel, you realize there's no division between our humanity. We are all equally precious children of God. Look at these beautiful people. It doesn't matter what their religion is. It doesn't matter what their government it is. It doesn't matter what their income is. They are just like us. And that's my most beautiful souvenir. I mean, I get a lot of good souvenirs in my travels. But just to see the oneness, and I'll come back to that later. But you see the power of this community and the power of people's faith, whether it's Christian or Islam or whatever religion. But I just love going to the developing world and seeing impoverished communities with vital churches. And I love to be reminded that when we travel, you find a lot of very strong faith, and you find people that just love their faith and they love their Savior. And they think of their Savior as looking like them. You know, we got to be honest. Here in privileged white America, baby Jesus is white. A lot of people think he spoke English. Well, you go south of the border and Jesus just isn't white. I mean, in reality, he wasn't white. But I mean, we all get to paint our favorite religious figures any color we want. And I'm just enjoying the reminder when I travel around the world that Jesus is every color, and so are we. So this is kind of the thinking that I like to share with my travel as a political act talk. I can go to a church or a religious organization and swap out travel as a political act with travel as a spiritual act. Doesn't really matter. Travel just opens us up to realities on this planet that I just think are so important. And this is nothing new for me. Even when I was a kid, I was realizing this world is an amazing place to explore. And you learn more about your own home oftentimes by leaving it and looking at it from a distance. And in my travels, oh man, I just love getting out of my comfort zone, finding myself in a place where I'm confused, a place that wallops my ethnocentricity, a place that rearranges my cultural furniture. I need that. I thrive on that. It makes me better connected with our planet. It makes me a better citizen. So I've been doing this all my life, basically. I've chosen Europe, as I mentioned, as my beat, but it's not my favorite area. But it is, if you're going to write a book and want to sell a few copies, it's good to choose a place where a lot of people go. And for me, that, of course, would be Europe. My mission is really to discover places that will give people that intimate, through the back door look at Europe, whether it's a hill town in Tuscany or a beautiful chunk of the Riviera, like here in the Italian Riviera, the Cinque Terre. And then I just do my work. I study all day. I come home to the hotel. I type it all in. And then I write the books. My first decade of teaching, it was all about cheap tricks, Europe through the back door, how to catch the train, how to get inexpensive accommodations, how to get a good meal. The next decade, the 1990s, it was all about history and art and culture and cuisine. I wrote a book called Europe 101. And then since 9/11, I've realized there's sort of a Maslow's hierarchy of travel needs. And the bottom rung would be, how do you stay safe and get a meal and get a roof over your head and pack light and catch the train? You can do that, just by reading a book, I think, and learn those tricks. And then I was doing the art and the history. But the pinnacle of that teaching mission really is how to, well, look at the subtitle, how to leave your baggage behind. I just love the idea that the most beautiful souvenir that we can come home with is a broader perspective and a better appreciation of the oneness. And if we put that in a Christian context, it's the oneness that we're all children of God. I think my travels have really affirmed my faith, because you can't travel without seeing God. You see God in tears. You can't walk on a ridge high in the Alps without getting close to heaven. You can't see the love of a mother or a father for their child without seeing the love of our Heavenly Father for us. I just absolutely love the way my travels affirm my faith. And for me, that's a valuable thing. When we travel, we get close to nature. I mean, she looks pretty rugged there, but she's not. She rode the lift up for breakfast. And it's a revolving restaurant. And you can step out and sit on that rock and look pretty darn rugged. You can hike across the Alps, enjoying trails like this. Never come out of the Alps. You could hike from France to Slovenia. And every day you're just immersed in the wonder of nature like this. I just was on a 6-day hike around Mont Blanc. Can you imagine walking on this ridge? In some cases, it's like you're almost tight-roping high above the valleys on a ridge. On one side, you got lake stretching all the way to Germany. On the other side, you got this view, the most impressive alpine panorama anywhere, the Eiger Monk in Jungfrau. And ahead of you, you hear the long legato tones of an Alp horn, announcing that the helicopter-stocked mountainhead is open. It's just around the corner, and the coffee schnapps is on. That's enough to make a Lutheran go like this. Wow, I was so close to heaven. And I just love it. I feel so blessed, so thankful to be on the road, alive, thinking, being challenged, opening up, trying new things. A great thing about travel is you get out of your comfort zone. You find new foods. It doesn't need to be earth-shaking stuff, simple stuff. Cheese. You step into a cheese shop in Paris. It's a festival of mold. The cheesemonger is evangelical about his cheese. He sees the bumpkin American tourist. He comes over and says, "Oh, monsieur, come here." He takes me to the goat cheese corner, picks up a moldy wad of goat cheese, takes a deep whiff. "Oh, monsieur, smell this cheese. It smells like the feet of angels." Wow. Now, you don't need to go home and be all excited about spending too much money on stinky cheese, but you do have that option. And it's kind of exciting to think that for a lot of people, life's too short to eat cheap cheese. I mean, for me, it was no big deal. When I grew up, cheese was orange in the shape of the bread. Here you go, cheese sandwich. And now for me, it's one of the delights of good living. A great thing about travel comes back and back time and time again to me is you meet interesting people. Ireland's one of my favorite countries because in Ireland, I enjoyed the sensation of understanding a foreign language, something I don't really know. But in Ireland, everybody's got the gift of gab. They've got this wonderful lilt. They love to talk. If you meet a couple of guys on a balustrade like this, you get into a conversation. That's what it's all about. Forget your itinerary. You're meeting and talking to the local people. And the Irish, especially on the west coast of Ireland, where people actually speak Gaelic as a first language. They think Gaelic. And you just get a chance to talk to them. I was talking to these guys. I asked the guy on the right, were you born here? He said, no, it's about 5 miles down the road. Later on, I asked him, have you lived here all your life? He said, not yet. It's so much fun to connect with people. And you do that in your travels. It's the best souvenir. Get out of your comfort zone. Meet people. Meet the monk at the church. He'll invite you into his abbey and pour you some of his own limoncello. Wow, how much fun. So many people travel and you know, the monks and the nuns, the sisters, they just seem so distant. No, they're just people dedicating their life to God's work, and they'd love to meet you. Meet this woman whose family for many generations has made the most beautiful chocolates. Become a cultural chameleon. This is what I love. I'm like a physical cultural chameleon. I am not into chocolate unless I'm in Belgium, and there I'm going to the best little chocolateria, and I'm learning about it, and I'm enjoying it. When you travel, you want to flex with the cultures. I mean, you want to, when you go to France, you're going to have escargot. One of my favorite treats as a tour guide is to make sure everybody eats one snail. You don't have to eat a lot. You don't have to like it, but you got to try it. When I travel, I really want to be that temporary local. I don't make tea here in this hemisphere. It doesn't make any sense to me. But in England, each night after a nice day of sightseeing, I go back to the bed and breakfast. There's that tea machine there. I make myself a little spot of tea. It feels right. You know, when I'm in Czech Republic, I don't have wine. I have a nice glass of Pilsner. It's the best beer in Europe. When I'm in Tuscany, I don't drink beer. I drink a nice glass of full-bodied red wine. Vino rosso corposo, per favore. You want to eat and drink what the locals are drinking. You want to think. You want to be in the mindset of the locals. Then you're connecting better. Then you're going home with that connection. And for the rest of your life, you've got a better global citizenship. As a teacher of travel, it's really important for me to remember we've got to go back and put ourselves in the mindset of this travel. When we go to St. Peter's Basilica, for years I went to the headquarters of Roman Catholicism as an angry Protestant. I went inside this cathedral, St. Paul's Basilica, and I was just bummed out because of whatever the values that I thought were misguided. And then I learned, that's wrong, Rick. Park your Lutheran sword at the door. Park your Lutheran sword at the door and go in as a temporary Roman Catholic. Enjoy it on its terms. Enjoy it thinking 500 years ago this was the best way mankind could glorify God, building this amazing church. It's beautiful. And now I enjoy my visits to the Vatican. In Europe, as all over the world, people treasure their liberty. In fact, there's a statue here in Spain where the town thinks they have more liberty than we do. They got double the liberty. And in our travels, we see that. We can go to a little town in Italy where the older kids teach the younger kids to make a good ravioli on a festival every year. We can go to a little town in France where the Chamber of Commerce has gotten together and made these orbs so visitors can better appreciate the fine difference between the local wines. We can go to a market somewhere in Italy where people happily pay too much for their loaf of bread in order to buy it from the person who baked it. That's becoming a neighbor. That's being together. We can go to a community that really appreciates their fine wine and at the same time knows how to fill it up cheap. There's actual filling stations for table wine all over the Mediterranean. We can talk to people in different communities that are sister cultures. We can compare notes. And we can come home and help make our society better because we're learning from other societies. We can remember that other societies appreciate the power and the strength and the commitment to freedom and democracy that is the United States. I'll never forget going to a castle in France, and I was filming, and the sun was going down, and please, we got to get up onto the rooftop and get a nice wide shot. And they said, no, we will never let an American visitor into our house without having a little party first. And they brought out the wine and the cheese, and then, like bringing out a religious relic, they unfurled their 48-star American flag. And they said, we vowed that we will never let an American in our house without thanking them for the valor of American soldiers to come in and defeat Nazis and win us back our freedom. And we'd like you to go home and tell your neighbors that here in France, we're forever thankful for American valor and strength in our darkest days in World War II. And then, of course, in the fight against communism, the United States, I think, won an economic battle of attrition with the Soviet Union, and Europe is thankful for that as well. In our travels, we recognize that every culture has its 4th of July. We recognize that every culture has its dream. I grew up thinking the American dream. Why wouldn't everybody have the American dream? And then I went to Sri Lanka, and I realized Sri Lankans have the Sri Lankan dream. My Norwegian relatives don't have the American dream. They got the Norwegian dream. My friends in Bulgaria have the Bulgarian dream. This is a beautiful thing, and this is something I think we need to be mindful of. I guess I'm just so excited about the lessons you learn when you travel. And I'm thankful for, again, how it makes me a better citizen of this planet. And if we're people of faith, I think citizenship needs to be thought of in a broader sense. Because if we're people of faith, we believe we are all children of God. That means we're all neighbors. When we travel, we get to know the neighbors. We get to know the family. And when we become better citizens, that means we become better citizens of God's great creation. When did I get that idea? Well, I was in Norway. This is a beautiful park in Oslo behind the Royal Palace. I was 14 years old. My parents were just loving me. And I was aware that this was their first trip to Europe. They didn't have much money. And they were giving huge sacrifice to bring their little kid along. And I remember my parents were loving me. And then I looked out in this park, and it was speckled like a Monet painting with other parents loving their kids just as much as my parents loved me. And it occurred to me, this world is home to billions of equally precious children of God. We're all equally lovable. And, Thomas Jefferson said, travel makes a person wiser if less happy. I'm certainly thankful for the burden of knowing that we are all one on this planet. It's a celebration and it's an obligation. And if I take that seriously, then I think I'm a better citizen of this planet. And I'm so thankful for that lesson I learned as a little teeny bopper, that this world is filled with equally lovable children of God. And when I travel and I see the love of a parent for their child, I celebrate. I see God. I see love. I'm inspired. I also see struggles. I see struggles that we can't imagine. In Turkey, I was tooling around in eastern Turkey, and we came upon a high school stadium filled with students. And when you're a tour guide in eastern Turkey, you don't have a list of famous sites. You're just out on a cultural scavenger hunt. If you see something like that, you stop and you go in. We stopped our bus. We went into the stadium. 100 kids thrusting their fist up in the air, singing in unison. We are a secular nation. I asked my God, what's going on here? Don't they like God? And he said, oh, no, we love God. But considering the rising tide of Islamic fundamentalism just over our border to the east, we are very concerned about the fragile and precious separation of mosque and state here in Turkey. So this school is having a pep rally for pluralism. Whoa, a pep rally for pluralism in the shadow of Mount Ararat. Separation of mosque and state as well as church and state. I had never considered these things, and I wouldn't had I not traveled and gone into that stadium and met these people. I was in Afghanistan, backpacking through a long time ago. A professor sat down next to me in the cafeteria. He said, are you an American? I said, yeah. He said, I'm a professor here in Afghanistan, and I want you to know that a third of the people on this planet eat with a spoon and fork like you do. A third of the people eat with chopsticks, and a third of the people eat with their fingers like I do, and we're all civilized just the same. Wow, he had a chip on his shoulder. And when I think about it, he was right. I thought less of him because he ate with his fingers. And I went there. I talked with him. I met him. He took the initiative and explained to me We're all civilized just the same. I was thankful for that lesson. It made me a better citizen. This world is filled with people who our government thinks we should be enemies with. Iran, Cuba, Palestine, Russia. Well, we have problems with their governments, and we have good reason to be concerned about certain policies. But the people, we're all in this together. And one thing I love about travel is when I travel to places where we meet people who are supposed to be enemies, places our government frankly does not want us to travel, I'm undercutting that misunderstanding. I'm undercutting that division. When I go there, they learn about me. I'm an American, and then it makes it tougher for their government to demonize us with their propaganda. And when I come home, it makes it tougher for our government to demonize them with our propaganda. It's a beautiful thing. What's not to like about that? If we all traveled more, the world would be a more tightly knit community, and we could work out our problems a little better. Boy, oh boy. I'd love to talk at length about my experiences here and different things, but I'm running out of time. So I'm going to go a little quicker through this than what I had hoped to. But when I was in Iran, it was a beautiful experience. I made a 1-hour TV show about it. But I was nervous to go there. And then I learned it's a friendly place. I mean, you've got hateful propaganda. Look at that flag there, 8 stories tall, down with the USA, dropping bombs for stripes and skulls for stars. But that was painted before any of the people on the street were born, and they've got a government that doesn't let them speak out. I mean, it's a theocracy that's not a democracy, driven by fear. I was in a traffic jam in Tehran. I mean, it's a big city, 10 million people or something, lots of traffic jams. It was silent. Suddenly the person in the next car asked my driver to roll down the window, handed over a bouquet of flowers, and said to the driver, my driver, give this to the foreigner in your back seat and apologize for our traffic. Ha! I don't know about, in Michigan, but that certainly doesn't happen in Seattle, where I live. Later on, we were stuck in another traffic jam, and it was quiet. We're just sitting there, and suddenly my driver just blurts out, death to traffic. I go, what? I thought it was death to Israel or death to America. He goes, no, right now it's death to traffic. I said, what's with you Iranians, always saying death to everything? And he said, well, when something's out of our control and frustrating us, we say death to that. And then I thought, he doesn't speak English very well. He's trying to translate this to me. What's he translating? Damn. When you say damn something, you're saying death to that. So he's just saying damn the traffic. Damn Israel. Damn America. Damn whatever. Well, I thought, have I ever said damn something? Damn those teenagers? Well, yeah, sure I have. Do I really want them to die and burn in hell for an eternity? Not yet. But it's after midnight. Turn down the music. Damn those teenagers. We've got to travel. We've got to talk to each other. We've got to get past these little you're with us or you're against us black and white bumper stickers and realize the world's a complicated place. We've got baggage. They've got baggage. We need to talk with each other. That's the beautiful thing about travel. And when we travel, we understand the context. When we go to Iran, it's a beautiful situation. And you understand, we've got 9/11 baggage. We lost 3,000 people on 9/11. Iran lost over 1 million people. They had 1 million casualties in the Iran-Iraq war. And today you go to the cemeteries and they're filled with memories. They're filled with widows weeping on the tomb of their son or their father or their husband. For 30 years, every Friday, this widow has gone to that tomb and wept. And what's she weeping about? Well, Iraq, Saddam Hussein, funded by the United States of America, invaded their country. And her loved one died. This is baggage. Did America really fund Saddam Hussein? Who is the bad guy? Who is the good guy? It doesn't matter. This is what she understands. This is her outlook. This is her burden. And the world has these burdens, and we need to understand them. On the last day of my shoot, we were working on the streets of a big Iranian city, and a woman came over to me, and she kind of did this sort of, put her finger on my chest, bum, bum, bum. Are you an American journalist? I said, yes. And she goes, I want you to go home and tell the truth. We're strong, we're united, and we just don't want our little girls to be raised like Britney Spears. Whoa, I thought we got something in common here. And it occurred to me, what is she really concerned about? She's concerned about her cultural heritage, her morality, her family, her love. She doesn't want her little girl to become a boy toy, a crass materialist, or a drug addict. And that's the propaganda and the media of the age has her scared. And if the United States is going to do a regime change and put another Shah on the throne, that's what she's worried about. And I thought, whoa, there I've just better understood. I've just better understood the reality between Iran and the United States. And I've understood that the majority of the people in Iran, what motivates them to support their government? What motivates them to support policies against the United States? What are they driven by? They're driven by fear and they're driven by love. They're good people driven by fear and love. That is the base over there. Less educated, small town fundamentalists, good people driven by fear and love. We can learn from that. We can learn from that. And we learn from that in our travels. And if we don't go over and connect, we lose that opportunity to become better citizens. The same thing would be true in the Holy Land. By the way, all of my TV shows are available for free anytime at my website. If you go to ricksteves.com, you can watch my Iran show, you can watch my Holy Land show. We did a new show called Hunger and Hope, Lessons from Ethiopia and Guatemala. And I'll just whip through this very quickly. But 10% of our world is living in extreme poverty. Half of our world is trying to live on $5 a day. 10% is trying to live on $2 a day. $5 a day, that's tough, but that's kind of reality in my mind. $2 a day, given all the affluence on this planet, is inexcusable. We could do it. We could beat hunger. This is something I've worked on really hard because of my travels and because I'm a good citizen of the planet and I know our neighbors, our siblings in Christ, are not able to live properly because of structural poverty. And I know the value of foreign aid as a practical investment. And I did this show to teach what is modern aid all about, with the reality that half of America they may wear a cross on their lapel, but they really could care less about love your neighbor. But they do care about their own self-interest, and that is stability and security. This world would be a better place. It'd be a more stable place, a more secure place, if we recognize the value of soft power and we work to fight hunger. We can do it. The new aid is so inspiring. And I've got this 1-hour program that I make the case. And the ravages of what climate change is doing in the developing world, the fact that the reality every day for women on this planet is to walk for firewood and to walk for water, hours to abandon their kids. What's it like to live off the grid with no water, no medical, no firewood? It's difficult. And when we travel with our window rolled down, when we travel to connect, as I have for 30 or 40 years, we become a citizen of the planet. And we realized even if we're motivated only by greed, if all we care about is our financial well-being and the well-being of our loved ones, if we know what's good for us, we don't want to be filthy rich in a desperately poor world. It's not a pretty picture. You go to Central America, you go south of the border, and you know there's an armed guard in front of every bank, in front of every pharmacy, in front of every hotel. Middle-class neighborhoods pool their resources to hire this guy so their kids can go to the park safely. We're heading that way as a nation if we don't deal with the gap between rich and poor. Good citizenship is recognizing that, and recognizing that even if you are wealthy and privileged enough to barricade yourself behind designer fortifications, and even if you can convince you and your neighbors that this is not structural poverty, but it's just lazy people that are screwing up, it's not right. We can do better. We can know, especially as Christians, as people of faith, that these little girls and boys are just as precious as ours. And we have the wherewithal to make a difference. My daughter has $5,000 for straight teeth and money left over for a whitener, and so does every girl in her classroom, because we're privileged people that can have children with good dentition. And we get it because we work hard, we have a winning system, we love our kids, they get straight teeth. But for the cost of one set of braces, you could dig a well in a thirsty community, and these kids' mothers could stay home instead of abandoning them every morning. To dig a well for the cost of one less soldier overseas. We need soldiers overseas. I'll grant that. But for the cost of one less, we could drill 100 wells every year in 100 thirsty communities. And then we would be better citizens of this planet. I think we'd be walking the talk as love your neighbor, people of faith, and our world would become a more stable and more safe place. It's a beautiful thing. And when I think of how travel connects us, even in this last trip as I was flying home through airports where people had to keep their distance. Travel is the opposite of social distance. Travel connects us. And when we connect, we become better citizens. Man, oh man, I've enjoyed just sharing this with you. I'll just finish off with this image I just love of a whirling dervish. As a tour guide, I try to get my travelers out of their comfort zone. And one thing I want to do is take things that are kind of scary and make them less scary. When I take a group through Turkey, I want them to meet a whirling dervish, not a cruise entertainment dervish, but a whirling dervish who's a monk, who's a person of deep faith. I met a dervish in Konya, and I'll just paraphrase the conversation I had with him, but I said, hey, I'm an American tour guide. I've got 20 tourists in my hotel. We'd love to see you whirl. Can we watch? And he says, I'm not a photo op. I'm a monk. And when I whirl, I'm praying. But he said, if you want to understand what I'm doing, I will welcome you to observe. I said, great. When and where? On his rooftop at sunset. We gather. He comes out. He says, welcome, merhaba. I'm a dervish. You Christians would call me a monk. My prophet is Mevlana. I think you call him Rumi. I think the Christian equivalent might be Saint Francis, the prophet of love. Anybody can get their brains around the teaching of Saint Francis, just like Mevlana. 5 times a day, I put on my outfit and I whirl myself into a meditative trance, and I become a conduit of God's love, meditating on Mevlana's teaching and showering that love on my community. I plant 1 foot in my community. And if I was with you on stage today, I would demonstrate this, but I can't. But 1 foot on into my community with my family, the other foot goes around celebrating the diversity in God's great creation. And I go around in circles. One hand goes up to accept the love of my Heavenly Father, and the other hand, like the spout on a tea kettle, goes down and showers God's love on His creation, on my family, in my community, and celebrating the diversity on this planet. And I spin and I whirl and I meditate on how I can be a conduit of God's love. And as I watched that dervish whirl, his head tilted over, his robe billowed out, he lost himself in that beautiful thought. I looked over at my tourists, my travelers, and I thought what travel is doing to help them connect with this beautiful soul, to help them approach God in a different way, to help them be mindful that we're all in this together. I thought this is the value of travel. This makes us better citizens. And if we can take that awareness back home and employ it in our everyday walk of life here, in this beautiful world that we're blessed with to call home, we are making travel a tool to help us be better citizens. You know, we've got a little clip from a TV show, the only show I produced during COVID time. It's called Why We Travel. It's a half-hour love note to travel. And with my friends at Calvin University, we've clipped just the last 3.5 minutes of it. But when I did this program, I thought, what can we do to sum it all up? And to sum it all up, we've got this little bit, and it all leads to connecting. When we connect, we become better citizens. When we connect, we are making travel a positive thing. Let's look at this little video clip, Why We Travel, and then I'll look forward to some Q&A. Thanks.
By traveling thoughtfully, we connect. Even for those of us who can only travel as a state of mind, travel can result in a deeper connection. Travel connects us face to face with reality. It's not virtual. It's not through a viewfinder. Travel is candid, honest, being in the moment.
Okay. Thank you.
In a world hungry for authenticity, we yearn for connection.
But now she's quite big. She's like you, about like that, yeah.
Travelers connect with different cultures, different people. On the road, strangers are just friends we've yet to meet. Travel frees us from routine. It creates room for serendipity.
Okay, so now I'm ready to be a shepherd.
Serendipity leads to connections. Travel forces us to bend and to flex. It makes us more tolerant and inspires us to celebrate diversity. The lessons I've gained from exploring Europe the land of my heritage, are universal. For me, these lessons are affirmed and then stretched when traveling further afield. As a child ventures beyond his backyard, I ventured beyond Europe. Year after year, I pushed my boundaries. The world opened wide with a montage of wonders and lessons learned. Traveling beyond my comfort zone, culture shock became constructive. The growing pains of a broadening perspective, my ethnocentrism challenged. The celebration of difference and oneness at the same time. The recognition that love is love in their home just as in mine.
I think this is a beautiful, beautiful welcome here.
Through travel, we see a world filled with joy, with compassion, and with good people. We learn the more we reach out, the more we receive. We learn that we all share the same world,
Nice.
and we all share the same window of time. Travelers seek bridges rather than walls. Every wall has two sides and two narratives. For one to be truly understood, both must be heard. Traveling, we realize that challenges of our future will be blind to borders and best overcome not by conflict and walls, but by community and bridges. There's so much fear these days. The flip side of fear? It's understanding. And we gain understanding when we travel. Travel is more than a holiday. It gives us new experiences, acts as our greatest teacher, makes our lives more meaningful, and connects us with a global family. We can't all travel physically, but anyone can live with a traveler's mindset. It's a choice. Travel makes us more comfortable with the world, our hearts bigger, and our lives richer. And it makes us happier. And that is why we travel.
Well, let's have some questions and answers. I'm Karen Salpe. I invite you to email questions to askjseries@calvin.edu, tweet to the hashtag AskJSeries, or if you're in the room, write them on a card, raise your hand, and an usher will bring you the card and deliver it to me. We have some here already. One comes from a viewer who says, as I think about traveling to countries that are known for having violence or are in turmoil, how do you travel to learn and not be closed to learning because you're worried about your safety?
You know, Karen, I'm not a risk taker in my travels. I do not feel comfortable in a lot of places. So I steer away from that, frankly. You don't need to go to Uganda during a civil war to understand these things. You know, you can go to Turkey, you can go to Morocco, you can go to Mexico, you can go to Costa Rica. I just visited my son in Colombia. There are ways that you can, just dip into the developing world and learn that reality. But you can also learn it, just going to where people travel. You can go to Mazatlan and walk inland 6 blocks and hang out in the barrio and go to a little restaurant that locals would visit rather than the place on the beach with the barbed wire that keeps out the local people.
There are some questions about traveling during pandemic. One viewer says, I'm an avid traveler now living in Abu Dhabi. Some feel it's unethical to travel and potentially share the virus. Others say it's next to immoral to take that livelihood away from people who are struggling with the loss of their tourism business. A student asks how to help travel-based income communities during lockdown, besides perhaps buying goods online from them. Advice?
All these are very good concerns, and nobody has a simple answer. I mean, it's a moving target. That's the problem. And I think with every variant that comes, there's a parabola. It grows, it peaks, it fades away. What is the reality? I've tuned into the needs of people. Tourism is one of the, if not the biggest, it's one of the biggest employers in many parts of the world, and it's just devastating communities. Even in my little world, I've got 100 guides that are without work in Europe. It's a very, very difficult and scary time. But what do we need to do? I've thought, as I've been shut down here, I mean, I've gotten more media in the last 2 years than I've ever got before because I'm not traveling, ironically. I'm the travel guru stuck here in a little town north of Seattle. And I've said, my bottom line doesn't matter right now. My travel dreams don't matter right now. What matters right now is my community. And I'm very tuned in to the fragility of our communities, the fragility of our environment, the fact that behind doors there are very scary times for people. And we need to from a global point of view, be mindful of that as scary needs south of the border as well. But there's plenty of reason to be tuned into these concerns. And I don't think travel is a precondition for doing good in that regard. If people are concerned about the practicalities of traveling during the pandemic, every Monday I have a little party called Monday Night Travel. It's just a free get-together on my website. People can find it and join us. A couple weeks ago, my colleague and I, who have traveled a couple of months in the last 3 or 4 months between us, did a show just on the practicalities of the pandemic, and they might find some good information there on just how and how to travel efficiently and safely. Yeah.
Several people are asking how many languages you speak. I know I feel guilty when I'm traveling and can't speak the language, but there's only so many you can learn. But the other question related to that is what's the most challenging travel location you've been in where you didn't speak the language?
Yeah, the language barrier you'd think is a big deal, but I speak only English. I make a clear deal about it because I want to remind people you don't need to be a scholar and a linguist to travel. I can write my guidebooks, lead my tours, make my TV shows, have wonderful vacations all over the place speaking English, in part because it's the linguistic common denominator of travel. If a Greek meets a Norwegian hiking in the Alps, they're not going to speak Greek or Norwegian. They're going to speak broken English together, that's for sure. And then as far as language barrier in more difficult lands, it's kind of counterintuitive, but in places where English is, in countries that are poor or struggling or where you wouldn't think they'd speak English, there's almost a bigger imperative for people there to speak English, in my experience. And you'll find educated people that are in hotels and tourism, they speak English. Young people speak English. Our trick is not to learn the local language any more than the polite words, which are really important. But our challenge is to communicate in what the Voice of America would call simple English so we can be understood. I marvel at how a lot of American tourists just don't get it when it comes to rewire yourself in communicating. In some countries, nobody would understand the word picture, but they understand the word photo. They don't understand the word vacation, but they understand the word holiday. I don't know for sure why, but be tuned in to what works. If my car is broken in Portugal, I point to the vehicle and say, auto kaput. That would be understood, amazingly.
I know that in high school I spent 3 weeks in Germany and was trying to soak in and remember every detail of the experience and the beautiful scenery and the food and everything. And when I got home to good old Dayton, Ohio, I found myself paying closer attention to my experiences and the scenes there. I'm wondering, to what degree has experiencing other cultures led you to appreciate your own?
Boy, that is a very insightful question because I've got this interesting passion for journal writing. And I've just been tuned into that during COVID because I've just had a chance to do that. And I wrote crazy before I was a travel writer, filling up journals as a kid. And I haven't read them for 40 years. I wrote a 60,000-word account of my hippie trail bus ride from Istanbul to Kathmandu. I'm actually publishing a book about it right now. But by writing in a journal, you're alone with your thoughts and you put them together, you crystallize them, and you can also look for a deeper value and meaning of those. I love the notion that when you leave home and look at it from a distance, you learn about your own home in ways you'd never learn if you just stayed right here. I love the notion that things that we are afraid of, we're afraid of because we haven't met them. And in our travels, we can meet them, and then we struggle with these thoughts, and if we write them down, we organize those thoughts, and I think there's a real value in that. I just think it all ties in with the value of travel.
what lessons have you seen being applied as visitors and host communities try to understand how to curate what's valuable from the past while still allowing for organic, vital growth in the present for the future?
Explain that to me again. I don't understand the question.
How are you seeing communities work to honor, appreciate, and learn from the past while adjusting and preparing for the future?
Oh, yeah. Well, I'm a historian. I'm not a scholar, but I just value history. And I really believe that it's important and I got a business degree. I got a history degree and a business degree. And I got the business degree to be practical. But when I look back on it, the practical value in my life has been the history degree every bit as much as the business degree. A lot of people are too impatient about change. And we've got to look at things in a broader perspective. We've got to remember, this is a long story and we're in the middle of it. We've got to look at it also with being mindful that different societies are on different evolutionary tracks. And we have to give people a little slack. We got to remember we've got baggage that they don't understand. They've got baggage that we don't understand. We've got to remember that we're all trying to move forward. We all want life to be better for everybody, but we've had our Reformation. We've had our revolution. We've had our Enlightenment. We've had our Vatican II. I mean, there's a lot of things that we've had, and we're expecting other people to have had that. And it's just, you got to look at it in the big picture, and you got to cut people some slack, and you got to try to understand their context. As a travel teacher and a tour guide, I try to encourage people to remember, hey, 150 years ago, there was no Spotify. There was no recorded music. There was no opportunity in your whole life to hear an orchestra. You heard a piano rendition of a big orchestral piece that somebody who lived in a city could hear, and you got together by candlelight as people would play the fiddle and the pump organ, and you would have these musical salons. It's exciting to think that we have come so far in such a short period of time, and I think we just got to pause, enjoy where we're at, and be patient that we can work together and continue the exciting progress we're making.
Let me try not to make a mess of combining about half a dozen questions here. I have people asking about what can you do if you're not able to travel physically or financially? What can you do in terms of domestic travel that's valuable? And what can you do, I guess this is, what can you do when you can't travel or when you can't go to Europe?
Yeah. I'm really blessed because I get to talk to a lot of people in my radio show. I produce a 1-hour show every week, and I have for 15 years for public radio. And I get to talk to a lot of people who find the cultural stimulation and learning without having to be physically able or without having to be economically able. I was interviewing a mother who didn't have any money, and she was a single mom, and her children were cooking their way through 50 cultures. They chose 50 cultures, they put them in alphabetical order, and every week for a year, they would go, okay, now we're eating Ethiopian, now we're eating Mexican, now we're eating Thai, now we're eating Ukraine, now we're eating Norwegian. And they went shopping, they learned, and they ate, and they were traveling every week at the dinner table. That's a beautiful thing. I've been locked down here because of the pandemic in a beautiful, privileged little corner of our world, I've got to say, but I haven't been able to travel. And what I've done is I've taken my traveler's mindset and I've focused it right here in my community. And it's a fascinating thing. I mean, what is a good traveler? A good traveler is curious. A good traveler wants to get out of their comfort zone and try new things. A good traveler wants to explore different ways to be passionate. And a good traveler wants to be connected with their neighbors. I can do that right here in my little town, and I have. And it's showing me there's more dimensions to life than what I thought there were. I can be a traveler right here at home.
Well, one of our viewers wants to know if you've ever been to the breathtaking city of Grand Rapids, Michigan.
It's pretty sad what I've traveled in the United States. I love my work. I've found my niche. I just live and breathe my travels, and I've got as a travel writer, I'm pretty lucky because I've got a nice platform where if I produce something, a lot of people get to, I hope, enjoy it. And my commitment is to be the best I can about Europe. For me, Europe is the wading pool for world exploration. But every time I travel around the United States, I realize, boy, there's a lot to know and appreciate about our country. When I do travel, it's usually in and out of a town to give a talk or be on TV for a pledge drive and that kind of thing. And then my mission is just to catch the plane and stay healthy and do a good job. So I haven't really been able to enjoy wonderful cultural centers like Grand Rapids.
But that means that there are openings for the rest of us to become good tour guides and ambassadors for Grand Rapids.
For sure.
On that note, Rick, I want to thank you so much for spending this time with us. And I want to thank our underwriters today, Covenant Living of the Great Lakes. Thank you all for your questions and your attention. I wish you happy travels this weekend, and I hope you'll come back Monday to hear Latasha Morrison. Thank you all. Have a great weekend.